Cameron simply turned the entire game on its head. Chrissy is rushing to get answers after the shocking revelation, and Jim Jones silently turned to go. Fans are in disbelief. The streets are humming, and perhaps the most explosive fallout too yet. Let's examine what actually transpired. Harlem was bustling, but not for the typical reasons. It had nothing to do with the release of a new mixtape, a fashion statement, or even a rap feud. This time, the murmurs, side glances, and whispers were all focused on Cayman, a guy whose reputation had been established through more than simply eloquent skill and flair, but also on his boldness in saying things that others would not. Additionally, when Cayman chose to place something explosive was released into the public, it was never only rumors. The leak he released this time wasn't only a light-hearted poke at the sector. It was intimate. It was cruel. It completely destroyed Chrissy Lamon's world, making it impossible for Jim Jones to overlook the harm. The industry was rocked by what Cameron disclosed. The rapper from Harlem, who is renowned for his cold delivery, Jim Jones, and the renowned diplomat's legacy, have long had a tense connection. They had established an empire. Throughout the years as they attempted to mend things, but they had also witnessed that empire fall apart because two egos, financial conflicts, and loyalty concerns. However, the wounds never completely healed. Therefore, Cam's startling release wasn't merely a coincidental act. It was computed. It was like creating an open wound that would never heal. There was more to the leak than a trash tune or an ambiguous Instagram Live statement. Cam stepped forward with real proof, audio and video receipts that brought Chrissy into the worst possible limelight. According to reports, there was film of Chrissy in precarious situations, which starkly contradicted the persona she had worked so hard to project on Love and hip-hop. Chrissy has been this powerful, foolish lady standing next to Jim for years, defending their relationship, battling for her own independence as well as for respect from his mother, Mama Jones. However, what entered exposed presented an alternative narrative in which Chrissy was not the victim but rather a person with personal secrets. The internet boomed right away. Fans who had been following Jim and Chrissy's story for more than 10 years were taken aback. In a matter of hours, memes began to spread. Instagram and gossip websites had a blast. Comment sections become full-fledged battlegrounds. There was mayhem between Team Chrissy, Team Jim, Team Kemet. Some expressed sympathy for Chrissy, claiming that Cam had gone too far and broken the bro code by bringing up personal matters. For the entire globe, some contended that Chrissy had anticipated it and had engaged in risky behavior while in the public eye. For too long, karma had finally caught up. However, the individual struck that Chrissy wasn't the toughest. Jim Jones was the one. Jim had spent years defending the world as against Chrissy. When Mama Jones openly disapproved of their relationship, he had supported her. He had attempted to strike a compromise between his allegiance to his girlfriend and his die-pet brethren. To demonstrate that Chrissy was his rock and his ride door, he had given up friendships and economic prospects. However, Jim was now in the worst situation of his life due to Cam's disclosure. He was not just his brother-in-arms exposing his woman, but everyone in the business was waiting to see his reaction. Would he ever stand up for Chrissy? Once again, even if the proof appeared to be negative, or would he ultimately abandon the relationship he had worked so hard to uphold? Things were chaotic behind the scenes. According to people close to the couple, Jim and Chrissy's house was tense in every way. According to reports, Chrissy sobbed and said that Cam's disclosure was out of context, overstated, or even made up. She pleaded with Jim to keep what they had created intact despite Cayman's resentment. This time, though, Jim was difficult to persuade. For years, he had been placed in circumstances where his allegiance to Chrissy cost him additional connections. Observing Cam use their own lives as a weapon, Jim couldn't get rid of the suspicion that his long-standing partner could have left him open to disgrace. Cameron, meanwhile, maintained his composure. He made jokes, revealed subliminals, and made suggestions on social media that if someone attempted to approach him from the side, he would reveal much more. Cam's style has always liked that. Never return down, never display weakness, and never allow anybody to steer the story. The reason he dropped was a topic of constant dispute among fans. The first leak. Was it retaliation for prior grievances? Was it? Because despite their attempts at reconciliation, Jim and Cam had once again drifted apart. Or was it simply Cam being Cam, enjoying controversy and mayhem? However, the effect was indisputable. Jim Jones was unable to leave the house without hearing murmurs. About Chrissy, the vibe changed even at industry gatherings. Individuals who previously now Harlem royalty was staring at him. The one that asks, "Hey, is what Cam stated accurate?" Jim wasn't the type of man to tolerate disrespect, especially in front of the entire world, and his pride was damaged. When the cameras weren't filming, Jim and Chrissy's tension reached a breaking point. Long silences replaced arguments, and long silences resulted in a chilly distancing. According to reports, Jim began cleaning on old acquaintances, being away from home more often, and wondering if the lady he had dedicated over 20 years of his life to was truly worth the turmoil. Chrissy felt deceived not just by Cameron, but also by Jim's reluctance. She had battled for years to demonstrate her allegiance. Now, everything appeared to be undone with only one leak. Fans who had grown up watching hip-hop and love were shocked by what they were witnessing. This was no longer only a drama on reality TV. It was unadulterated, true life. Chrissy had always desired a happy ending, complete with marriage to Jim. However, that dream now appeared more for the first time. Jim didn't merely argue back. Instead, he walked away, making him more aloof than before. That's what insiders said, anyhow. Jim allegedly left their house for a number of days, not returning Chrissy's calls. The man who once stood up for her in front of his friends. Mother, and there was stillness throughout the whole hip-hop business. And in times like this, silence speaks louder than words. The leak had done more than humiliate the basis of an already precarious partnership. The connection between the relationship between Jim and Chrissy is now unbreakable. Just as the link between Jim and Cam was, fans were left guessing while Harlem and the industry watched. Was this the last straw for Jim and Chrissy? Oh, or would they manage to put things right again like they always do? There was one thing that was evident. Cameron's startling disclosure wasn't simply another headline. It was a pivotal moment, a time when pride, love, and loyalty clashed in the most visible manner imaginable. And the world realized that this tale was far from over when Jim Jones left. From the end, Harlem was mistaken if they believed that Cayman's spill marked the end of the storm. The drama was just getting started. The leak itself was the first part of this story. Rude and hard to ignore. However, the second portion dealt with the consequences, emotions, and aftermath that extended much beyond Jim, Chrissy, and Cam. This was no longer limited to 3 individuals. Mama Jones was drawn in by the headline, which turned into a show. Colleagues in the industry, and for more than 10 years, millions of people had been emotionally immersed in Jim and Chrissy's narrative. The Mama Jones caused the initial ripple. She had never been Chrissy's biggest fan, as anybody who followed love and hip-hop could attest. Mama Jones believed Chrissy was manipulating her son, dominating him, and creating a rift between him and his relatives. Mama Jones even made a diss tune about Chrissy at one time, and their altercations were legendary. Mama Jones didn't hold back when Cam revealed the information. Mama Jones lost it on Instagram Live. Although she didn't specifically identify Chrissy, it was obvious from her remarks who she was referring to. A few individuals have started donning masks for years. They adore what comes with you, even if you think they love you. The truth is always revealed. And don't weep, baby, when it does. Fans immediately poured fire into the comments. New comments include Mama Jones, smiling faces, and emojis. It was a dagger to the chest for Chrissy. Her boyfriend's mother, who had been her harshest critic, was suddenly applauding her once her private affairs were made public. Decline. Jim Jones.
However, remain
Remarkably silent in public. Jim was well known for years for defending Chrissy in any situation. However, his quiet following the release was overwhelming. Supporters started speculating about what he might do next. Would he give Cameron a clap in return? Would he make a statement in support of Chrissy, like he had always done? Or had Cam finally shattered him to the point where he lacked the strength to no longer defend his relationship? Insiders said Jim was conflicted behind the scenes. He had a profound affection for Chrissy, on the one hand. She was more than a girlfriend. He had formed his life around her as a companion, when he was struggling financially, when his career fluctuated, and when everyone else appeared to leave, however, he was unable to disregard what Cam had demonstrated to the world. It no longer mattered if it was 100% factual, twisted, or exaggerated. The harm had already been done. Jim's image as Harlem's capo, his pride, and his reputation were all entangled in public humiliation. Humiliated in public. Embarrassment. Additionally, Cameron was an expert at playing the antagonist. Cam responded to every blog post about the issue with mysterious remarks, smiling emojis, or phrases that looked to make fun of Jim's masculinity. "I'm not doing it, so don't be upset with me." He added, "I just hit play," beneath a post that went viral. The fans loved it. Others, however, chastised Cam for going too far. Even non-Team Chrissy members acknowledged that certain, particularly when they have the potential to ruin families, topics shouldn't be spoken. Eventually, the conflict spread to business circles. Jim recently appeared at an event in New York, appearing obviously exhausted. He was not his typical charming self, according to witnesses. He avoided interviews, stayed out of the spotlight, and hardly smiled. Jim usually flourished in the limelight, but now he appeared to be a man of weight, defeated by treachery. There were even rumors that Jim left mid-con when Kay's name was mentioned. Dialogue. Chrissy felt even more humiliated. Blogs examined every moment of Cam's spill, making her the talk of the town for all the wrong reasons. She was unable to get away from the news. Chrissy was found sliding. Cameron reveals Jin's lady a flaming tale of love in Harlem. Even those who formerly respected her tenacity and fortitude in the face of love and hip-hop were now wondering if she had been acting out a part at home all along. The disagreements grew more heated. Jim was accused by Chrissy of leaving her when she needed him. The most she thought he was allowing Crown victory, allowing his former partner to control the story of their romance. But Jim had a different perspective on it. The fact that Cam was ever involved in leak indicated that Chrissy had left a gap, an opportunity that was now being seized to publicly degrade him. You don't know what it's like to step outdoors and be stared at like an idiot by everyone. Jim supposedly lost it during one heated conversation. Chrissy had maintained her loyalty for years, so their remarks were painful. Even Jim doubted it now. Hip-hop and love producers were also affected. Word got out that VH1 was rushing to determine whether this real-life issue might be included into the plot of the upcoming season. Drama is the lifeblood of reality TV, and Cameron's leak was priceless. Jim, however, had no interest. According to people close to him, he didn't want anything to do with cameras just then. Life wasn't a narrative. In front of millions of people, lying was a nightmare. On Instagram and Twitter, however, fans were unable to stop guessing. Discussions erupted. Some accused Cam of taking it out on Chrissy because he was resentful of old Dipset grudges. Chrissy was blamed by others, claiming that her history had finally caught up with her. Jim was accused by a startling number of people who said he should have known better. Rather than fully trusting Cam or Chrissy, the one subject on which everyone was in agreement, the Jim and Chrissy saga's most dramatic chapter 2 yet was this one. On TV, people had witnessed them argue, cry, split up, then reconcile. But this time felt distinct. The suffering wasn't only a plot device this time. It was genuine. Additionally, many believed that the relationship may be nearing its end because of Jim's quiet and his reluctance to defend Chrissy right away. Rumors that Jim was spending more time with former Dipset associates and relying on individuals outside started to circulate. His social group. There were even rumors that Jim was thinking of severing his relationship with Chrissy entirely, leaving after over 20 years of highs and lows. He's worn out. According to one source, he also made sacrifices. Too much for too long. The last straw was this leak. Chrissy, however, was not going to give up that effortlessly. She continued to think that she and Jim could overcome the tension and embarrassment. The tempest. After sticking by him through good times and bad, she wasn't going to allow Curran to be the reason the romance terminated. "We've been through worse," she allegedly said to a pal. However, had they truly experienced worse, or was this the type of treachery that, at the end of the week, no relationship could withstand? There was one thing that was evident. Jim was getting farther away. Chrissy was displaying signs of desperation, and Kamain was savoring every moment of the mayhem he had caused. Harlem was split. The internet was split. With popcorn in hand, the industry watched. The question that hung over everything was straightforward yet cruel. Would Jim Jones eventually stop talking to Chrissy, or would he once stand by her side in the face of humiliation once more? The solution was still unclear. However, one thing was for sure. The story was far from finished. When the dust one thing was certain, as things started to settle around Cameron's leak, for Jim Jones, nothing would ever be the same. Chrissy Lamon. Once regarded as the pinnacle of hip-hop devotion, the pair was now dangling by a thread. Every blog, podcast, and gossip site featured their personal conflicts, and the cacophony around Jim increased in volume while he stayed mute. In private, Jim was battling feelings he had suppressed for years. He had prioritized Chrissy's pleasure at the expense of his job changes, friendships, and occasionally even his pride. However, Cayman's leak had made him confront an unpleasant reality. Perhaps loyalty was insufficient on its own. Perhaps love, regardless of how deep, couldn't endure when everyone was waiting for you to fail all the time. Conversely, Chrissy refused to concede. She was aware of the harsh nature of the internet, and that Cam had achieved a significant victory by defaming her. However, Jim's silence was more painful than the leak. She had witnessed him stand up for her for years, and put everyone in their proper position. But she felt deserted this time. She was no longer only battling the media Mama Jones and Cayman. She was battling the man she believed would be by her side at all times. When Jim arrived home one evening after being gone for days, it was the tipping point. As soon as he entered, Chrissy addressed him, her voice shaking with anger and sadness. "After everything we've been through, do you really think you can just leave me?" She made a demand. Jim shook his head and placed his keys on the table, clearly fatigued. "It's not about leaving. Understanding what is and isn't real is the key." Chrissy was more hurt by those statements than by Cam's whole spill. She had battled for Jim's rights for years, dedication, even making a love and hip-hop proposal to him. Despite the highs and lows, she thought their love was unwavering. However, Jim was now doubting the basis of their partnership. Insiders said Jim had already been residing at a different location in Harlem, and rumors circulated that he was thinking about moving out permanently, distant from the mayhem. Chrissy thought that history was being repeated. Each time she believed that marriage was something eventually tore them apart on the horizon. Cameron's leak, Mama Jones, or business conflicts. The wound felt too deep to heal this time, though. In the meantime, Cam continued to fan the flames. He made light of Jim's silence on Instagram Live, remarking things like, "Funny how the loudest ones he never specifically said Jim or Chrissy, but everyone understood who he was referring to. He always becomes silent when the truth is revealed." While some applauded him and referred to him as Killer Cam, the truth teller, others chastised him for ending a relationship in order to make amends. Old scores. Even Dipset supporters were divided. Some believed Cam had compromised the fraternity by bringing up Jim's private. Others contended that this was just retribution because Jim had picked Chrissy over the crew years prior. Returning full circle, regardless of one's viewpoint. One thing was certain. Cam had totally changed the story. Alright, so Chrissy and Jim were left to pick up the bits. Friends said that Chrissy stopped going out and avoided public gatherings and photographers because the humiliation was intolerable. She braced herself every time her phone chimed because she didn't want to deal with the stares, the murmurs, the never-ending inquiries. Another blog article analyzing her life. Another headline for herself. Jim, on the other hand, felt defenseless, exposed and helpless, after once commanding respect with her fiery personality. Was thinking about things in a different way. He immersed himself in the studio rather than wallowing in the rumors. It had always been his therapy, and now when everything was falling apart around him, it was his way out. However, His suffering was evident even in the booth. Those who knew him well reported that his new songs had a raw quality. He was no longer merely rapping on the streets. There was a bitterness that had not been before. He was rhyming about grief, devotion, and treachery. When Jim eventually, he didn't specifically address Cam's leak when he sat down for an interview, but his remarks spoke a lot. Sometimes the people you think got your back are the same ones who will put the knife in first, he stated. I'm not here to prove anything to anyone. I'm here to keep my peace. Fans analyzed every phrase right away. Was he referring to Cam? Talking about Chrissy? Or was it both? The internet was humming with uncertainty, but one thing was certain. For Chrissy, Jim was not in a rush to mend the connection that had previously defined him. The interview was heartbreaking. She had thought Jim would use the chance to stand up for her, to tell everyone that regardless of what Cam had exposed, their relationship was unshakable. Cam had exposed, their relationship was unshakable.